And as soon as I I breached the line that separated the inside of the tent to the outside, and that bad feeling I had in my gut went right in my throat. And I knew we were about to get hit. I knew as sure as the sun is going to come up and go down that we were about to get hit. I didn't know by what. I didn't know if it was going to be followed by small arms fire. I didn't know what. I didn't know details. But something, I knew it was about to go down. And, you can call it my grandfather talking to me from beyond the grave. You can call it God. The good news is you can have your beliefs, I can have mine, and we're going to keep our head affixed to our shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were drinking, and to be honest, I wasn't crazy. Like, I had maybe like a couple drinks that night, and wasn't, feeling like horrible or anything. But we went to a party, and I had a roommate. I'm not gonna mention his name, but he's from New Orleans, and we went to this party, and we were all talking to girls, and they kind of got heated because of the girls we were talking to and stuff. So we noticed that we were leaving, and as we were leaving, it just got more and more heated, and my roommate from New Orleans, he's been through Katrina, and he's been through adversity, right. And he just wasn't going to tolerate it, and he knocked a couple dudes out right away, and so we knew from there, like, we're going to have to get ourselves out of this situation.
We're clearing these buildings, essentially, and we're towards the end of the 28-day mission, and it's kind of at a point where we've exhausted all of our supplies. We've had to, care package some stuff in. They're like, all right, we kind of need a new Green Beret team to come in. I think that this mission is sort of on the line where it's enduring, meaning that we need someone else to rotate in. So let's swap these guys out. They've been here a month, just getting after it. But these ISIS guys, there's a few hundred in this valley, not like 10. Jeez. And so we're at a point where they were getting pretty aggressive. What they do is they have acres and acres of opium, like thousands of acres of opium, which is essentially
and that's
heroin.
their revenue source, right?
That's their revenue source and also their inspiration. So they'll just crush a bunch of that and then just run at you.
Their inspiration.
That's the most insane thing I've ever seen. These guys are just kamikazes, to be honest with you.
One of the major successes with CBD and THC thus far has been neurological disorders, whether primarily epilepsy. Epilepsy in itself has seen great, just world-changing success out of CBD and THC material. Yeah. Primarily it's CBD coupled with THC, and a lot of that they think is primarily a CBN and CBG reaction with the brain and how all that works.
For me, I still get nervous. I get nervous, doing workouts out in the barn training. Either one, I know how much it's going to hurt, or two, I know how fast I have to go. And so it's going to hurt that way. It may be something short, but it's going to be more intense. And so for me, over the years, I've been doing this going on 11 years. I've realized that good things only come when it hurts, honestly.
No matter how hard you think you're working, there's somebody who's either working just as hard or maybe even harder than you. And so when I used to think about that as a kid, it always went to my mind, it's like, I don't want to ever be outworked. That's the worst thing you can do, is to be unprepared and then be outworked, because that's all on you. Mm-hmm. Your preparation is on you. And then if you get outworked, that's just physically you get dominated. That means you didn't do enough work. Mm-hmm. And so I've always took that to heart, even from when I first started playing at 7.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to meet obstacles. There are dumb people out there to this day. There's bias, there's prejudice. It is what it is. You learn to navigate it. You learn that you have people that will back you up if you need it. You establish your networking group. You join organizations like the National Association of Black Journalists. You meet people, but you meet people of all races and colors, and you impress them with your skill set and impress them with your ability to be a good teammate.
I know when I began at 7 playing, that was the only year I played flag football, and I was a wide receiver my first year. And then when I was 8 years old and began tackle football, I was a wide receiver, started out as a wide receiver, and the coaches, as we were going through a drill and running routes, catching the ball, and the coach was yelling at the receivers to run the balls back. Nobody could get it. The balls are flying all over the place. So they're yelling, "Hey, run the balls back! Stop throwing them!" And I, not being very coachable, I guess at the time, I threw one back after he had said that, and I threw it good. And so I got this coach's attention, and And then they put me at quarterback, and that's how I started playing quarterback. And
resiliency, perseverance, integrity, fortitude. We could come up with a list of synonymous beautiful words, but you did not say those words to me. You said, I don't want them to have the pride I have to get in the way of all the beautiful words we just made a list of, right?
Right.
So when I hear the word pride, I don't hear proud. Those, to me, those are not synonymous. I think we have made those synonymous because we want to have an excuse for being an asshole. So we say, if I'm prideful, it's because I'm proud, and I would go lie and all this imagery. No, that's bullshit. That's not true. When I hear pride, I hear fear.
Like, my thing is I just keep digging. Like, if you told me in order for me to get to where I want to be, I have to dig to the center of the earth, I'm going to keep digging until like it kills me. You know, like the picture where there's one guy up top, there's one guy on bottom, and there's a dime at the end, and the one guy up top stops like an inch short, and the guy on the bottom finally reaches it, but he's digging for another year or something. I'm the guy that just keeps digging. Where, like, it doesn't matter like how hard things get or how difficult things get, I'm gonna keep putting like one foot in front of the other.
I'll start by just saying, many people, most people in fact, very seldom actually think about their attention and the impact of what occupies their attention, what directs their attention. And so any attempt to think better about avoiding distraction, learning to focus, needs to start with a valuing of that resource. Because ultimately what you focus on, what gets your attention, will shape the trajectory of your career, the quality of your relationships, your view of the world and future, right? Even do you see it as a pessimistic, or are you optimistic? Like, that's a function of what we pay attention to.
You got to understand, we were running labs because even like one of the topics today, like testosterone, we found that a lot of the people with head injuries, they just weren't making testosterone very well. It was a very common theme. And so we ran a bunch of labs, and then we sat down and we said, okay, what is this person comprised of? They've got this lab marker, their eyes won't do this part of their brain doesn't look so great, this joint's hurting. And we just put it all together into one treatment program to treat the whole person. And, you know, a lot of people were like, man, you know, what you're doing is crazy. And I'm like, it's not crazy. It's really kind of the way healthcare should be. We're treating the whole person here.
Receivers, I would tell all the wide receivers when they come in, I said, man, hey, what? Congratulations. Y'all made this team. I want you to call everybody you know, your mom, sister, brother, uncle, niece, nephew, cousin, and your best friend, and tell them you made the team. The Dallas Cowboys, you made it as a wide receiver, but you will not be catching any passes. That's Michael Irvin's job. That is Michael Irvin's job. Let them know that, right?
So I was not allowed to tell my kids that I was in the CIA. And so I remember when I resigned to join Operation Underground Railroad, my oldest was 14, 15 at the time, and I finally could tell her. And she was very upset. She said, I can't believe you lied to me. What, you know, am I supposed to trust you? And then later she said, well, that's pretty cool. So you got to guard the president? You were with the Secret Service? I said, no. Those guys do amazing jobs. That wasn't me. I was in the CIA. She said, well, what's that? That sounds boring. So that was really good to humble me. It's always important.
And it's so confusing because, you know, I tell people the way we bleed, and I mean addicts when I say the way we bleed is in our behavior.
Yes.
The way a cancer patient that's also a disease, the way a cancer patient bleeds is through their body. The way we bleed
there you go.
is we lie, we cheat, we steal, we manipulate, we wreak havoc on anyone that has anything to do with us. And so, because y'all who are not addicted look at our behavior of addicts and you just think, why can't she just stop? Why can't she and
yes.
You know, I tell people, addiction happens when your brain and all the neurotransmitters takes over your mind, will, and emotions.
Have you ever seen somebody walk a tightrope? They'll start to go to one side and then they'll correct by moving back to the other side, and maybe they overcorrect and they have to come back this way, right? I think you're always kind of doing that with balance, and you're trying to find kind of the secret sauce, but you probably never quite get it. So I try not to worry too much about being completely balanced, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just try to make sure that, hey, over, you know, a year period, I'm not neglecting my kids, right? Over a year period, I'm not being a crap husband, right?
What matters most is energy balance
It's really boring. It's not flashy, but calories at the end of the day are what matter the most. So women, men, even, like, we don't need to be afraid of carbs. What matters most is the energy from the carbohydrate that we're consuming, the energy that we get from protein, the energy that we get from fat. Like, if the overall energy intake is less than the amount that we expend, you will have fat loss. So the research is very clear. Once we have equated for the correct amount of calories and you have the correct amount of protein in your diet for your goal, the remaining calories from carbohydrate and fat, it makes very little difference when it comes to fat loss.
I'm never looking for my next thing. Like, I've just never been like that. I'm 100% committed to what's happening now. And I think, when I talk and work with athletes today, and there's a lot of anxiety associated with performance and just life in general. It's really because you're thinking about the future, you're holding on to shit in the past. Like, it's just be in the moment.
I can safely say that I had a lot of fun at Baylor, and I still, a lot of my friends, and some that Darren knows in Dallas, I still hang out with, but I did not take the academic portion as seriously as a lot of others.
Trey, you say like you weren't.
I enjoyed my time.
You say you weren't an athlete, but that sure is an athlete's route through college. Okay, what are the least amount of tough classes I can take to get through this?
Listen, I always thought like an athlete just didn't have the body for it.
I love it because it's funny. At first, I didn't know there were guys. I've actually had people say no because they just weren't comfortable talking about that because they've never really either talked about it publicly, or unfortunately some guys have said they're worried about their brand being impacted by opening up about their faith. And so that's their right to say that, and I will never judge that, but I always say, listen, we have this platform if you want to talk about it. But the more when we had Matt Forte on early on, I remember him and James Brown, JB from CBS Sports, and we had those guys on, and Benjamin Watson too, and I would ask them about their faith and they would light up. Like, I could talk all day about my faith. Let's go. And then when I'd ask him about football, it was like, all right, I've been asked this question a million times.
And so I spent a lot of time studying negative thinking. How is it carried? Like, how do you change it? What's the easiest way to do it? Harvard, Georgetown, all these different places. And what we found out was that negative thinking was most powerfully carried by a team's language, an individual's language, organization's language, and that anytime you say something out loud, it's 10 times more powerful than when you think about it.
Consistent bedtime. Step number 2 has to do with caffeine, right? So here's the thing about COVID is we're all drinking more caffeine than we ever did before. And I'll tell you why. It's because we're all stuck on Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call. And we think, okay, I've got a couple of minutes between calls. My cup is low, I'm gonna walk in there and just fill it up. And we don't even realize it, but we're all increasing this caffeine. Most people don't know caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours, right? So if you don't stop drinking caffeine by about 2 p.m., it's going to influence your ability not only to fall asleep, but to stay asleep.
There's no freedom. I've been in countries where you cannot say anything about the government. You say one thing about a politician, rap. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't have any sexual preference. Like, it's just straight. If anything else, dead. You know what I mean? Like, you go down the list, I would go to these countries and see how people would live, and you can't practice no freedom of religion, no freedom of speech, no freedom of life, period, and no opportunities. And then I would just come back here and be like, hey, man, like, we have things we need to work through here, but I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Because of what I've seen, you know what I mean? And not just seen, but experience. You know what I'm saying?
So you said something interesting. You said how rare it is. I think it is rare. And I think the reason it's rare is because so many men are looking for the word you used. What is it that I'm passionate about? And they don't know how to answer the question. Because what they're looking for is like that magical idea or concept that is it. Like, that's the path, I know it. It didn't work like that for me. I just thought doing a podcast would be cool. Like, it sounded interesting to me. And with the financial planning practice, even to start there, it just sounded like, oh, I want to try this. I see other people doing it, but nobody's really doing it in the financial planning industry. I wonder if it would work. And that's all it was. And I took that step.
Whenever I was with the Team USA 18 and under national team in 2015, and there's a really sad moment where you got to cut guys right before, we go to play for a gold medal. Not everybody can be on a 20-man roster. And our coach stood at the front of the room and he's like, you know what? For those of you guys who get cut, remember, we cut Mike Trout from this team.
Wow.
The greatest player ever didn't make it. And sure enough, from the kids that we cut that year when I was with Team USA, man, there were 2 first rounders in that group that didn't make the national team.
Wow.
Other kids that were on the national team who are great kids and they're great ball players that didn't pan out to professional baseball. So we think that we can predict success so well. When I go and I poll, and I did this 3 or 4 years ago, I polled a room of like 30 big leaguers we had training in the offseason. There was one guy that made his area code roster. Like I asked Matt Scherzer.
That is amazing.
Matt Scherzer didn't even know what area code was.
So as an athlete, does it matter if I choose brown rice over white rice or wheat bread over white bread? What's the difference there?
So the difference is the darker ones, like the whole grain ones, they're going to have like a little bit more fiber, a little extra vitamins and minerals in them. So overall, like we want at least 50% of your carbohydrates to be coming from those whole grain sources. The night before an activity, the versions that are not whole grain, like the white versions, often are better because they don't have that as much fiber, so they're easier for your body to digest. And especially, lots of us get those stomach issues on game day.
Right.
So just not having all that excess fiber the night before can help relieve that.
Do that for almost 2 decades in my experience. At this point, you just find yourself in a position where you've put in so much of the work, you have so much of the foundation there that what would look like an enormous leap from like my very first mile to that 100-mile world record is actually like a lot of tiny little steps to get there, a lot of incremental gains. And sometimes it was taking steps backwards in order to make steps forwards and something like that. So over the course of that long period of time is where you start to, I guess, normalize it. So even though had you told me 20 years ago, yeah, you're gonna have to try to run 100 miles in under 7-minute pace, when you told me your goal today is to run under 7-minute pace for 100 miles, when I towed the line for that race, I was confident I was going to be able to do that. And it wasn't because I was shooting for the stars. It was because I had kind of put in the work, and I knew from my training, I knew from my previous races, if I executed properly, that's kind of what I would be able to do.
So we're sitting there, and the guy is describing the role of Tony and kind of telling him, here's how NBC would like to use you. And then he goes, and by the way, like when you're in the booth, you'll have a guy, with you that you call him a spotter. He can stand with you. He helps you prepare, da-da-da. He goes, so I can have a spotter, like anybody I want? And the guy's like, yeah. He turns to me and goes, you want to do it?
that easy. That simple.
And I'm like, I don't know, man.
Did you even know what the hell
no,
spotter
I don't know
was?
what a spotter does.
So I didn't want to go. And then when I left there, and I look back on it now, that tour was actually the most rewarding tour that I did in the 17 years, because you got to be part of the mechanism that grows the SEAL community into the future. You are literally a piece of the filter, and you can really mentor people, and you can connect with them, and you can teach them about what's going on in the world and in the SEAL community, and prepare them, and you can leave the SEAL community a better place than you went into it as.
So our first 10 years of business, I only made $58,000 total. So yeah, like not per year, like the whole 10 years. And so with humble beginnings, it really doesn't describe what we went through to get here. And then 10 years or 9 years in, we started First Form. And then we kept growing our retail company, and we kept reinvesting. And, this year, between all the companies together, we got a goal of $500 million is our goal for this year. We're gonna get real close.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that we can make as a parent, and I'm speaking as one now, my children are 28 and 26, and I have a stepson who's just got out of the Marine Corps at 22 years old. So I've done a little bit of that. We can take our fears and our worries and our struggle and our challenge personally, and we can put that on the kid. And that we begin to live out some of our hopes, some of our dreams through the child, and then even some of our fears and worries and insecurities. And so one of the things that I did when it became my responsibility to be a dad was to really pull up, and I had gone through a process of defining myself and knowing who I was. And I wanted to instill in them this idea of value so they could become critical thinkers. But I wanted to make sure that that my BS and my struggle and my trouble and my worry, it wasn't theirs, and it wasn't something that I basically cursed them with through life.
Tomorrow, and the body starts to trust that an Ironman a day is the new normal. And so I have to do everything I can to repair, and it starts to trust the fact that he's going to get up tomorrow and do another Ironman. I have to do, meaning I, the body, has to do everything I can in order to heal. And where magic happens, and where most people aren't willing to go to, is when the mind and the body becomes into sync with each other. And now that's when you can perform at the highest level.
I'm going to actually give all the credit for this direction of my life to my mom and my dad, because they had the wherewithal to see that I was broken, that like to see where I was at, and they said, well, you got to do something about this. Let's see what we can do to give him his power back. And so there's a weight set in the middle of the living room floor, and I literally just I would come home from school every day, and I'd put my backpack on the ground, and I'd sit on the weight set and turn on TV, and I just kind of find different positions on the bench, you know, with the pec deck and everything, and I just chill and watch TV. After a couple of weeks, I'm like, might as well just give this thing a go. So I just started playing around with it. A little bench press, some pec decks, some lat pull downs. And it became like a challenge for me. Every day I would come back and I'd throw on a little extra weight and throw on a little extra weight. My parents started getting more and more wheels to start putting on their little 5s and 10s and everything. And after about a month, I realized like I was getting significantly stronger.
I had no problem. I sat my junior year and third year in law school on the bed crying to God, saying, God, I will shovel shit with my hands 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, if you allow me to buy my mom a house and a car. I would, and I would be grateful. I would wake up every morning and thank you, go to bed every night and thank you, God. Just give me this opportunity to buy my mom. So that's where my mindset was. So 16 hours productivity a day was nothing to me, especially when I'm just talking to people, not shoveling shit with my hands.